Friends of the Youth Roundtable, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 33 of the Youth Roundtable. But pause for a second, let me give you a historical perspective into today's conversation. In the year 1999, the Democratic Republic of Congo, under the able leadership of President Laurent Desire Kabila, filed a civil suit or criminal case against the Republic of Uganda. This case was filed in the International Court of Justice. The Democratic Republic of Congo accused Uganda of acts against aggression and demanded for a compensation of 11 billion US dollars. The International Court of Justice went ahead to hear this case, and we know that as of last week, a ruling was given, and Uganda has been directed to pay a sum of 325 million US dollars. Those who love to use pounds, 240 pounds. What does this mean for our economy and for the international relations that Uganda has with both its neighbors and other allies across the globe? To enable us appreciate this conversation, I'm joined by a panel of young, enthusiastic, and well-read comrades of mine that now I take the opportunity to introduce. And I begin from my extreme right. Is the comrade of mine, Mr. Lawel Muhwezi. Lawel is a legal scholar at Kampala University. Lawel joins us as the first timer on this show. We are happy to have you, sir.
I'm happy to be here.
Do you want to say hello to our viewers?
Yes, once again, I am Muhwezi Joshua Lawel, a student of law at Kampala University and a member of the Now Generation platform. I'm happy to be with you today.
Wow, perfect. Next to my good friend Lawel is a member of the National Youth Council. He is also a member of the East African Youth Parliament. I also know that he's the Speaker of the Central Youth Parliament of Uganda. Comrade David Mugyema. David, you're welcome.
Thank you, our moderator today, Honorable Kidega. My name is David Mugyema. He has told you I am a member of the National Youth Council of Uganda, the Speaker of Central Youth Parliament, and a member of the East African Youth Parliament. I send greetings to all Ugandans, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
How is Masaka, sir?
Masaka, I represent Masaka, like he has said at the National Youth Council. Masaka is really sunny, but we are okay. We're doing well.
Okay.
Yes.
Any farming going on, or it is purely harvesting?
Basically, people have been harvesting, but I think they're going to have to arrange their gardens for April.
Oh, perfect.
Yes.
Next to Mugyema is a friend of mine. She's equally a law student at the Uganda Christian University. She's also a former guild speaker of the same institution. She's also a human rights and gender equality activist. She has a plethora of achievements. I know you're also an alumni of Africa Mama.
Yes, Akina Mama.
Akina Mama.
Africa.
I also saw you appearing in the New Vision Top 40 Under 40, something like that.
Yes.
Wow. So many achievements over there.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's a privilege to be here and to share more about international humanitarian law.
Oh,
Yes.
wow.
Yes.
Nice. This is Comrade Poni, Patience Ayikoru.
Yes.
Exactly. Thank you for sparing the time. Next to Patience is my good friend, Ndugu Asiimwe Hafashaimana.
Sure.
Asiimwe is a member of the National Youth Council, yes, but currently serves on the Uganda National Students Association National Executive Committee as the Secretary for National Affairs.
Wow.
Ndugu Asiimwe, we are happy to have you, sir.
Asante sana to my fellow listeners. That is me, Hafashaimana Asiimwe, a teacher.
Oh.
So I'm also privileged to share the current status quo between two countries, Uganda and our neighbors from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Thank you.
Thank you. Ndugu Lawel, let me begin with you straight away.
Yes.
The year was 1998 when Uganda did make its presence in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We spent about 5 years until around 2003 when we eventually evacuated our troops. And the late Paul Lokech is known for having walked the troops all the way from from Congo to Uganda, because I think we had some challenges with transport. I don't remember. But that is not the point. The point is, did we really have to be in Congo in that particular time? Because I have read from historians and from scholars of political science, and they'll tell you that Uganda says, or Uganda alleges that they went to Congo to insert maybe peace or to restore, should I say, an insurgence that was uprising. And indeed, you would say they were successful because they were able to depost the late Mobutu and install Kabila. So did we have to be there anyway?
So I think from where you end, because it is important for us to have this discussion within the context then.
Yes.
And if the question was, should Uganda have intervened or could they have restrained? I think they had no option but to take part. Because you need to also understand and draw back that that was more of the second phase. There was, because the Congo War was in two phases.
Yes.
The first was against Mobutu,
yes,
which was largely tied to the conflict in Rwanda after the Kagame establishment took power, and I think there were Hutu rebels that were
yes,
in the eastern part of Congo,
yeah,
and therefore Uganda being a close ally to Rwanda, it had an obligation, I think, to participate and alleviate that situation. So again, but after removing Mobutu, and then you have Kabila who took over, who also was quite hostile because he wanted to establish himself. And I think there was a general feeling that he was a puppet because you had different leaders from Rwanda who were in leadership. And when he says he was dismissing Rwanda and Uganda's intervention, I think it put us in a very hard situation. So more or less, I think Uganda was obligated to take part because also you need to understand what Congo means to Uganda as a strategic neighbor. And that whatever happens in Congo, and this is a principal argument I advance up today, even with the recent intervention in Congo,
yes,
is that whatever happens in Congo, how stable Congo is also determines how stable Uganda will be or is at that particular point in time. So even in the context then, and even today, I think Uganda has a duty and obligation to make sure they intervene in these neighboring countries to make sure that they are stable for the sake of their own stability. I think that the law students who have addressed their minds more to refugee issues, etc., they will tell you that, you see, if Congo is not stable, you'll have a refugee spillover.
yeah,
But also because of the terrain in Congo, you have a lot of conflict, a lot of armed groups, over 200 actually in the eastern part of Congo. So I think it was important then for Uganda to protect its interests and those of Rwanda, perhaps, though that relationship got sour at some point.
yes,
But it's also important for our strategic security to make sure that Congo is stable. However, I think as we advance in this discussion, we could examine whether what actually happened when they went or when they left was the right thing to do. If we go into that discussion, I would largely disagree that our duty was not perhaps to establish ourselves there, was not to do anything with the minerals, it was not to do anything with killing people there. So I think if to answer the question, should Uganda have participated? I think yes. How they conducted themselves, is it consistent with why they should have been there? I would say no. So that is my precise answer to your question.
Well, perfect. Ndugu David, let me just pick up from where Lawel has stopped. And just to cement his point, I will take you back to 2005, when George Walker Bush, in his inauguration speech, he said that the stability and peace in the USA can only be sustained if there is peace and democracy across the world. And that's the argument that Lawel is trying to advance, that Uganda could have gone to DRC Congo to ensure that there is stability there, because once there is instability, it affects us as a country. But also, he puts the argument of, we need to examine our motive of going there versus what we actually did. Is there a correlation, or our motive, or what we did defeats the motive with which we went? You belong to the National Resistance Movement.
Sure.
You're a young party member. Do you agree with Lawel that yes, our going there was justified?
Good. Thank you so much. I want to thank Honorable Lawel for what he has said and giving me an opportunity. Once again, David is my name now. Honorable Kidega, you cannot achieve peace on the continent unless you have a continent that is stable. And for the sake of peace, hard decisions must be taken or made. Let's look at the United States. Or, before even we go there, there's what we call opportunity cost in economics, value of alternative foregone.
Yeah.
At that moment in the late 90s, there was a lot of instability in Rwanda, like I has told you.
Yes.
There was a lot of, spillover in the Hutus that had done the massacre, the big percentage, of course, of the Hutu. About 1 million people had died in Rwanda. So they had to go and hide in Congo. We all know that history, you get.
Yes.
Now, what would Uganda have done at that particular moment? And it was an ally of Rwanda. And Uganda, even to establish a regime in Kigali, it was Uganda that backed up Rwanda. So, asking whether Uganda should have gone at that moment, no one was sure, no one was secure. Look at the geography of Congo. A lot of forests, a lot of rebel groups. We all agree that Uganda should have gone. Look at USA. It is the wealthiest nation on earth. It has the strongest army and all that. But it has army bases over 80 across the world. You see when 9/11 happened in 2001 and then, Bin Laden hit the Pentagon and World Trade Center, the Bush said, no, we have to pursue the enemy, even where they are hiding in Afghanistan.
Yes.
You've seen, even having killed Bin Laden in 2011, USA Army and her NATO allies, they remained in Afghanistan until last year. They've just left. Meaning that if you have a threat as the world, no one should sleep peacefully if someone cries out there. Look at the Congo, the population, over 100 million people, you get? So it means that whenever Congo coughs, it's Uganda that catches the flu. So you cannot sit here and brag about stability when your neighbors are not stable. Europe is being guarded and protected by the NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Yes.
Even the Congo belongs somewhere, the SADC, South African Development Community. Now, the difference is, Congo belonging to SADC, when it has problems, rebel outfits, insurgents and all that, we've had the M23, we've had the Mai, we've had the FDLR, all those, insurgents that want to overthrow the government in Burundi. The administration in Kigali says that the insurgents in Kivu they want to overthrow the administration in Kigali. Even Uganda is saying Allied Democratic Forces, they want to overthrow that administration. So whenever Congo coughs, it is our region as the East African community that we do catch the flu. It's not the SADC, because I've not had Angola being disturbed by what happens in Congo. You get? They used to say there was Savimbi of the Nita insurgents and all that. But even when Namibia came to participate in that war, because it was termed as World War of Africa, you understand? Namibia, it came to pick a few diamonds, maybe and to go. Mugabe was there being flamboyant and all that. But who gets hurt most? Look at the population of the DRC. It is Uganda. So, asking whether Uganda should have gone or not, let's look at what Uganda should have done. President Museveni usually tells people that we are looking at Uganda the way, we are thinking about Uganda the way it should have been, not the way Uganda is right now. And when they assessed and examined the magnitude of the damage, they said, you see, DRA was saying that Uganda maybe spent 20 billions, maybe in damages, maybe Uganda should pay 15 billions, they toned it down to 4 billions. Until they said no, the judge said no, there are no facts to establish that Uganda actually caused this kind of damage. So we are going to have to agree that we get a sizable amount of compensation. But even then, we have moved away from that. What we need as the East African regional bloc is to work together. We've seen that today we've started falling out with some people. Example, the neighbors in Rwanda, we've started falling out. And you cannot guarantee what tomorrow brings. Much as we want the East African Federation, we cannot rely on one partner for trade. We have now to start opening a way to start doing business with Congo, counting on its population. Now, when we are going to do that again, we have to start constructing roads. But again, we have to go and pursue the ADF and, root it out completely so that we can do business and we develop as a region. And actually, I'm one of the people that do support the Congo, it's called Democratic Republic of the Congo, to be part of our regional bloc as soon as yesterday. Not the SADC, because whatever goes wrong, it is the East African community that suffers with Congo. But if Uganda has capacity now to go and pursue even rebels or terrorists in as far as Somalia, as far as the Central African Republic, as far as Sudan, we've given stability to Burundi. Remember when Pierre Nkurunziza was being removed from power in 2015 and the administration in Kampala restored him? You remember when our friend Salva Kiir in South Sudan was being disturbed and the administration in Kampala restored him? You remember when we took the Kigali administration to power as Uganda, the Uganda People's Defense Forces. So there is enough proof that whatever Uganda did was for the benefit and for the good of the people in Congo. So I would beg to submit, maybe later, like I said, we're going to examine the content, the manner, the form, what happened exactly there. And how do we move away from that and now start to build this region into a powerful force? You cannot grow, you cannot graduate, you cannot succeed and prosper like solos, like as one as a country, you need all these neighbors. I beg to submit.
Perfect. Comrade Patience,
Yes.
if I'm to combine the submissions of the two gentlemen in one statement, I would say Uganda had no option but to intervene in the Congo crisis. What's your own view? Because my question would be, yes, we had no option, but at what expense is the question? At what cost? Today, the cost levied on our shoulder is 325 million US dollars. If you break it down, that is 65 million US dollars per year. That is a lot of money.
True.
Yeah. So what does that mean for our economy, one? But two, do you agree with our comrades that, yes, we had no option but to intervene in Congo?
Okay, thank you so much, Kidega. Well, I want to agree with the two comrades here that partly Uganda had no option towards that, towards the acts that were there. And I want to draw our minds to the conventions in place from a legal perspective that international humanitarian law conventions agree and say that when you're getting involved in an armed conflict, be it international or non-international, you should be able to avoid the use of force. And that is stipulated under the Article 2, Clause 4 of the UN Charter. So when Uganda went to Congo, it was termed by the ICJ as an occupying party. Now, occupying party under Article 43 of the Hague Regulations of 1907 provide that if you're an occupying party in another state, you must have been the one providing the tools, the machineries that are used there. You're the one who is giving treatment to the people. You're the one who is ordering the army there, or the rebel groups and all that. But is there evidence to prove that Ugandan UPDF was actually doing all that? I do not want to dispute the fact that we were there.
Yes.
Of course we were there, and I'm not condoning, I'm condoning the acts that could have been done by the UPDF as per the ICJ ruling. Yes, those acts could have been done, but then there should be another way in which such resolutions should have come to term. The money that has been given, like you've stated, is a lot of money, and Uganda is already working on a deficit budget.
Let me just pause you right there. Sorry, but because you say that there should have been other means on to which we could have resolved this crisis.
Yes.
And I'll tell you that I have read somewhere that because there were many countries, not only Uganda, that was taking part in the Congo conflict. But I was told, or I've read somewhere, that Rwanda, because they had presence in court on a particular day, they were able to negotiate their way out. Okay, and that's why up to date, Rwanda has no cost levied on its shoulders. But Uganda, because of, I think, negligence or because of, I don't know what, for some reason, on that particular day when court was, I think, giving room for mediation or for negotiation, apparently we had no one in court. There was no person representing Uganda. So that is how Rwanda was able to negotiate its way out and said, okay, for us, we shall settle this outside court. Uganda, because of our maybe negligence or lack of representation, the court proceeded with,
Well, in my opinion, I just want to state that even when Congo was instituting that case at the moment, we realized that, yes, like you've said, the Rwanda and all that were excused from the case. But then, away from what you've stated, we have seen the statements being put across the internet from the government, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the Attorney General of Uganda. And these statements, of course, deny the fact of the activities that are in that were taken, that happened in Congo. But all I'm saying is that this whole judgment should bring our minds to think widely, far beyond pressing points at each other, who is who, individuals coming up and all. I think we should draw our minds to the weaknesses of the UN mechanism systems in place. Why? Because we need to look at, did we utilize our localized means? Imagine if we were under the African Criminal Court, which has not yet been actually instilled, because we had the Mabalo protocol that was there in place to forward the institution of an African court. Assuming we had an African court, we would have solved our matters as African courts. Like my comrade here stated, Uganda had to go there because effects of war within Uganda is already a landlocked country. Now, if we do not engage in trying to make peace around our continent, around our region, then that conflict is going to spill over into Uganda, and of course as a growing or a low developing country we shall suffer the impact of that. So what I'm saying is this judgment should draw our mindset to what weaknesses are there in the UN system. Would the judgment have been different if we were looking at it in an African perspective? Can we strengthen our regional mechanisms like the IGAD, the SADC and the AU in order to handle our matters? Recently we have seen the peace talks and settlements in Lusaka between Uganda and Congo. How far is that? And for me, the greatest irony of this all is the fact that now DRC and Uganda are working on a joint armed force to fight the ADF in Congo. Congo has consented to the UPDF going. I want to use a very, I don't know, a lame example of a relationship. How would you let someone come back into your life if you know they're not good for you, if they're toxic for you? So why would Congo allow the UPDF come back if it knew we were toxic?
Yeah.
So me, despite all those acts that were committed and the ICJ saying all that, I feel like we are yet to even talk, I think later on if I'm given an opportunity, to talk about the impact of this amount of money that has been brought and whether it is feasible in Uganda for a country that is already in a deficit economy. So as I conclude on what you had said or what my colleagues have said, is that we need to look at the localized and customized options available for us, the legality of this, and of course, what justice must be seen to be done as it is. What am I saying? These reparations that are being brought, will it serve the purpose to the victims? We need to also think about that. Will that money reach out to do we even know if the victims are still alive? Some of these victims might be dead or not. So we need to know, and the UN or the UN systems do not even provide for a way of how these reparations are going to be given down, how it trickles down to the individuals in particular. So despite the acts of the UPDF in Congo and any other countries, we shall even look at, I think, AMISOM, they're doing a good job there, trying to have sensitization and, you know, bringing about peace within our continent. We also, I want to commend the UPDF for being ranked as the top 16th in 2016 by the Global Fire Powers as the best UPDF army within Africa. So I believe even when they're doing some wrongful acts, a few of them, they need to be punished for that, yes, but then we need to look at the gravity of that punishment on a country that might not pay in the next 30 years to come, and yet justice still has to be served.
Many thanks. I'm glad that you used the example of a relationship. And given that we're in a love week, I think that was a very good example to use.
Yes.
Yeah. Ndugu Asiimwe, Hafashaimana, our comrades here seem to agree that Uganda had no option but to intervene in the Congo crisis. Now, my concern to you is the eastern part of Congo, Ituri, is very endowed with timber, gold, you know, all these good minerals. Do you think that Uganda, yes, whereas we had a good motive, we could have somehow gotten deviated and gotten attracted to the gold that our soldiers or our good fighters saw in Congo and ended up, you know, losing focus, and here we are having to pay all this amount of money?
Thank you, Ndugu Kidega. I want to begin by saying that where purpose isn't known, abuse is always inevitable. We would want to first establish what was the purpose of Uganda going to Congo, especially in the eastern part of the country, Ituri. Of course, definitely, like you put it, Ituri is a place that is very much endowed with minerals, copper, tungsten, that is used to make electrical gadgets. Perhaps maybe there was a deal, and in my own opinion as a Hafashaimana, once a neighbor has a problem, maybe it's a house that has been caught by fire, then it is always a task by the neighbors to see how they can combat energy to stop the burning fire of the house. Now that Congo has been, or it is our immediate neighbor, that means Uganda had no any other option apart from getting there to occupy and seek for peace, something of the sort. However, the fine that has been ordered by the ICJ to Uganda for the damages, destructions and whatever, I also want to put it in my opinion in a way that there is no any single money that can buy humans.
Yes.
That means, in my own opinion, like comrade Patience was trying to put it, there is no way how, yes, it is the final ruling from the ICJ, yes, but I do believe that there are those other impacts that are going to either affect the residents, both in Uganda but also in DRC. And I realized that previously, Antonio Guterres, who is the Secretary General of the UN, in the recent conflict that Russia had with Ukraine, he equally put it that if there is any other issue within the United Members of States, then diplomacy is the only option. And I don't want to look at the fine that has been put to Uganda as a way of diplomacy. And I also want to remind us that by 2005, when Uganda had similar engagements with the DRC, there are also those other kind of engagements that could be Uganda refused to pay the fine, about 11 billion. Yes, 11 billion, but Uganda refused. They instead had to sit with the leadership of Congo to negotiate if they would dodge paying the money, but also understand the other terms and conditions on how they would continue living peacefully. But of course, we also need to analyze the decision of the ICJ was not a consensus by all the leaders in Congo. There are those who say it was in order. It is in order for Uganda to pay the 325 million US dollars, but there are also a section of other leaders. An example is Honorable Saj Muba, who is a honorable member from the Ituri province. Okay. For him, he says it's okay for Uganda to pay the money, but we need to look at the effect long term. How is it going to affect us? However, I want to say that we are going to get back there, but I also want to agree with the rest of my colleagues. If there is a problem in your neighbor's home, then it is, of course, the neighbors that you should come and really put the situation to normalcy. So I want to say that it was okay. It was okay, but now the purpose is what we need to find out. That is the assessment and evaluation. We need to understand why Uganda has been charged of, I hear, damages caused the destruction of the natural resources, some etc. So I don't want to go very far from what the colleagues have already shared, but it was in order for Uganda to get to Congo, but we now need to analyze the purpose of Uganda getting to Congo and the repercussions that came out through. That is my humble submission, especially for now.
Thank you very much. Ndugu David, yes, let me come to you. The world order today is an eye for an eye.
Yeah.
Okay? You make a mistake, you pay for it. Okay? You go against the law comes after you. Okay? So Uganda seems, yes, to have had a good motive, we all agree, but it seems like we made some mistakes. And the ICJ is saying that you made a mistake and you must pay for these mistakes. But we have heard the Attorney General of Uganda saying that this is an unfair judgment. So in your own perspective, is this unfair? Do you agree with the Attorney General? Is this unfair for us to have to pay 65 million US dollars? And by the way, the first installment is due September. So I don't know how we shall balance.
I don't want to sound, I don't want to victimize us, the Africans or the continent. But to the best of my understanding, we have never seen Tony Blair, George Walker Bush, Hillary Rodham Clinton being summoned for acts of war, for war crimes. But Gaddafi has been killed, Saddam Hussein has been killed, nations have been invaded. So that alone shows how unfair and unbalanced this kind of judgment sometimes is. So it's unfair to always come after, coming after the African leaders, even when they're trying to solve their own problems internally. Why is the UN really so concerned that Uganda should pay this money? But it has always sent troops to the DRC, but again, these troops have been killed and they're not solving the problem. So if we have sons of the soil, like the general of the National Resistance Army, the general of the regional NRA, standing and he solves some of these problems, actually with proof, I think we should first give the credit. Then, by that time, Uganda had spent, let me first finish. We had spent in power by 1996, 1998 for close to 10 years or 12 years. You look at the UPDF that at that time didn't have a court martial, where even when soldiers go on a mission and they error, there isn't a clear system on how to put things to order. Now we are celebrating a UPDF, a national army, that has a court-martial, where General Museveni says that should a soldier be involved in anything to do with misbehaving, there is now an institution to punish. You understand? So, whereas we are trying to hammer the UPDF for what didn't go right, right? Right now there is a system that solves that. That's why wherever the UPDF has gone later, after that Congo War, UPDF has been appreciated. We have not seen cases from the AMISOM, African Mission in Somalia. UPDF has not had cases where maybe soldiers have stolen, maybe soldiers have looted, maybe soldiers have raped people. The president has been on record saying that in any way, should UPDF misbehave, if it is murder, if it is rape, if it is assault, the law is clear. You go to the court-martial. We have seen the big generals being touched here in Uganda. So let's not hammer the UPDF for what didn't go right that time, right? And appreciate that the far the UPDF has come in the current days. We are having now a national army which we are proud of as a country. Today, a lot of young cadres, the professionals, are being recruited in the army, and we have glory as a country and appreciate the fact we have come. Now, on the side of the debt, it's quite unfortunate that the country is going to have to pay, and the ruling is final. But I think there are so many ways, like my comrade said here, Honorable said that, look, we should have been given chance to negotiate. But again, you said that when we were given chance to negotiate, Uganda didn't show up. Now that's weakness as a country. And I think now we are going to have to learn a hard way, right? But now, me, I'm thinking by the time, like my comrade said, that you are being invited back. And then the same court is saying that you were toxic in a relationship. Something's not adding. I believe the two leaders are going to sit. You see, we are showing already goodwill, going to assist on the invitation of DRC, going to assist Democratic Republic of the Congo on ADF, constructing roads, opening business, trying to seduce the DRC to come to the East African community. There was a scenario when President Museveni was appreciating Burundi for having helped him when he was still in the bush. And President, I think, had to give them around 14 billion. And the Burundi government said, look, please, pay big fare and send us books. I believe there is a way we are going to handle this, excuse me, as brothers and sisters. We don't want to look at this date because it has come in any case. We can no longer challenge this. This is final. So I think this date, I know it's unfair, it's unfortunate, but I would ask the leaders of this country and the leaders of Congo to find means through which we are not going to pay this burden, rather this debt in a way that is going to burden Ugandans, and we feel hurt, we feel disappointed, but we sit on a round table and we say, we are constructing roads for the Congo. Yes, let's give Congo this. Let Congo give us this, right? But in any case here now we are going to have to pay. We shall give Congo a compensation that is going to just create this bond. And let's not forget that the UPDF has come of serious age, of experience, of discipline, of professionalism. Let's not look at the UPDF of 96 and 98 and 2000s. We have now a better UPDF.
Fair enough. Lawel, yes, I can see your hand is up. But as you prepare to give us your rejoinder, let me just put this question to you right away. Comrade David tells us that this is an unfair judgment. And we have had many scholars, of the law and even the Attorney General saying that, no, this is unfair. But I will tell you that because David, in his own words, says that Africans should have had the opportunity to handle this as Africans, and same did Comrade Patience. But I will tell you that the world is now a small global village. We are an international community. So is it hypocritical for us to seek support from the international community in times of crisis, like during the COVID-19? We accepted the COVID-19 vaccinations and other forms of hope. But when issues like this arise, we tell them, no, don't, partake of our matters. So answer that plus also your concern.
That is exactly my point. I think we have been given a wrong definition of Pan-Africanism and Africanicity that sometimes we do not know where to apply it. So we think that any form of intervention or relationship with UN or with the West, again, is maybe a conspiracy against us, which I do not think is true.
Okay.
But let just to deal with the two. One, it is important to understand that the complaint was lodged by Congo, right? It sought remedy in ICJ. So I do not. It should not be seen that it is the whites, it's the UN which is intervening in our issues. Why don't they leave us? I think it was an African country which sought redress from there. But secondly, about how having.
So does that vindicate the United Nations? Or
yes, it actually acted merely as an arbiter, not as an actor with entrenched interests. I don't know if you get it. Yes. Acted as an arbiter. Yes. And unfortunately, if you're from a Congo side, you wouldn't be blaming this ruling, right?
Yes.
So we are complaining because perhaps we are the victims now.
Yes, yes.
But secondly, on the argument of having African problems, African solutions, African systems, African courts to deal with African problems, I think what we need to understand that there was a chance for negotiation up until even last year, when it was, I think, reduced from 11 billion to 4 billion, Uganda saying we have 200 billion, and they did not agree and they left it to court, right? Okay. So there was a chance for negotiation. But also, I think throughout this process, even during the war, there were African interventions, Libya intervening to, talk to Uganda and Congo to solve these challenges. But why I disagree with her is that in the status quo, no African institution has capacity to deal with this magnitude of challenges. I think we need to recognize that Museveni, as an individual, is a strong character who perhaps you are not sure that we have any other actors who have capacity to force him into compromises, into accepting to do certain things. Okay. You look at the conflict with Rwanda, and at the end of the day, the Angola intervention didn't work. You had to have, at the end, you have mutual things that you share in common that have brought us together now. But also, our leaders, we don't have strong systems, as even African Union doesn't have even capacity to solve the existing conflicts. We have a plethora of military coups where people attain power without going through democratic systems. But African Union has little capacity to intervene and force these illegitimate governments. Yes. So I don't think that, even if ideally would want African solutions, Africa as a country does not have systems that are strong enough to solve these conflicts, even if we wanted them. But also on the issue of reparations of these fines, he says that there is no amount of money that can bring back lives. People are saying here, it's unfair. And she says that the people will not benefit. There is not perhaps a method which will enable these monies to trickle down to the affected families. I don't think that is the idea, right? I think that you have committed crimes, maybe crimes against humanity or against a country. I think at principle level, you should be able to compensate. When you look at the judgment, I think the judge was fair when he said that reparation should not be punitive. We should not just seek to punish, but maybe to compensate. Okay. I think whether there is capacity to trickle down to the affected individuals or not, we are justified to pay this money. But I think the government also is responsible for its people. So there's no better. So if you're paying these monies to the country, again, because of the role of government and provision of public services, then I think gradually the country gets to benefit. But then also about the relationship, I think that we need to understand that countries don't run like friendships, that today you piss me off, today we shall not laugh. Because countries can always have disagreements, but when they reach points of mutual interests, they can always work together. I think that is the situation we are faced with, that the eastern part of Congo is sort of a failed state there, and therefore that it is in Congo's interest and it is in Uganda's interest that ADF is dealt with. And I think that where it is possible for them to work together to alleviate a common challenge, the relationship is understandable. Sorry. Everything else notwithstanding. But I think what we need to agree, and without being patriotic, and because we have that obligation, but we should be right and fair to the people of Congo. We all agree that Uganda should have intervened. What I do not agree with is what happened. And there is evidence that there are particular commanders who came back with gold. There is evidence that actually people died there. So should Uganda face the consequences of its actions? I think yes, they should be able to face those consequences. What I think what now we need to discuss is moving forward. Uganda should, I think, draw these lessons for future purposes, and also those are some of the fears we have as a country when Uganda intervenes now because of ADF. We would all agree that ADF needs to be dealt with, but do we have a strategic plan on perhaps when do we get out of Congo? Is it when ADF is subdued? Is it when it is completely eradicated? That we cannot guarantee. How sure are we that we are not going to again get entangled in the local challenges of Congo, because Congo since then has had these, it's one of the hardest to solve crisis areas, because you have, like I said, you have conflict within the territories. You also have business, mineral cartels, which deal in timber and gold. You have these militias, right? So now that Uganda, for example, has gone to deal with ADF, but they have not stopped at airstrikes. They are now even ground, right? Which means they have to establish a presence there. How are we sure they don't get entangled in the affairs there? Secondly, Uganda has put roads. There is dot services?
Yes, dot services.
The one doing the road construction, it is extending electricity. Uganda has an obligation to protect its businesses and those who are constructing roads, etc. How are we sure that these same things, because of its continued presence, won't again reoccur? So I think what this judgment means is that Uganda now should take care in its interventions. And perhaps this judgment, as we pay the heavy price, it will guide our future foreign policy, at least within the Great Lakes region.
Fair enough. Let me come to you, Patience. Patience, yes. I have read from Professor David Welch. David Welch is a professor at Harvard University. Welch tells you that the international system is a self-help system. You're there for yourself. So I would not be surprised if Congo, even when we are neighbors, still goes ahead to frustrate our outside of the court negotiations, and they insist that we need this money. They're trying to look out for themselves because, like I've said, it's a self-help system. But also, let me quote Lord Palmerton, who in the British House of Commons in 1848 said that Britain has no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. So Congo is our ally at times, but on this particular case, they're saying, no, you must pay our money. So, just to put, because Lawel put an indictment on your argument, okay?
Yeah.
When you say that Africans need African solutions, African institutions to solve African problems, Lawel is saying that no, our institutions don't have that capacity to address our internal challenges within the continent. But also, like he said, did we really know when to leave Congo? Because we spent 5 years, 98 to 2003. So just to respond to that, then I will conclude with Ndugu Hafasha, then we'll go for the break.
Okay, thank you so much. I just want to respond to what Lawel had earlier said. I think when I stated that we need African solutions, or we have a localized way of handling the matter, he took it as saying our African systems and solutions are set. The question or the word I used was we need to strengthen the African mechanisms. Why? Because there are certain weaknesses to the UN systems. Of course, away from tribalism, away from racism or anything of that due. With due respect, as a student of international humanitarian law, the UN systems are the highest hierarchy in form of resolution of armed conflicts. But then, even then in their conventions, they state clearly that before you run to the international mechanisms, have you handled it domestically? Human rights, armed conflicts, have you solved it with the domestic, the regional, as an African region before you run to the international courts? Yes or no? So we need to put that into time. And why Lawel is saying African solutions might not be best, I agree with him, is because they are not yet strong enough. That is why, as youth here on this panel, or people out there watching, or those in those offices and the concerned parties, need to look into strengthening these African systems. That even when we have heads of state that are very stubborn, or heads of state that might not want to succumb to such courts, they should be able to respect the legal norms in place. So, of course, Uganda, I also did not, I really condone what happened. I do not disagree with the judgment of the ICJ that yes, mediations were tried to be made. However, you know, the money is still there and all that. And then I do not also condone the bad acts that were really done by the UPDF during that time, because by the time the ICJ makes a judgment, then there must be evidence, there must be a way or a reason why they gave the judgment. But what I'm saying is, yes, we are going to take on that punishment. Of course, for every action you do, you have to be punished.
Yes.
But let's be reasonable. Uganda, first of all, that 325 million US dollars is a fraction of what we already owe Kinshasa, ladies and gentlemen, out there. Can you imagine? So how do you expect a country that is already crippling in its economy, that is already on a deficit budget, to pay that money? What I'm saying is...
So let me ask you, is that of concern to Kinshasa?
Well, to Kinshasa, it might not be of concern because they want their payment back, and I don't blame them, of course. They need to pay back the victims or to, restate their infrastructure or anything that was lost. But they need to look at, okay, when will that money come? September, like you said, was supposed to make the first installment. Of course, they even make it nice that we have to pay in installments, but to be realistic, do we have that money for the installments? Now, in my opinion, I think there's other ways of paying this money. It might not be cash. We might not pay that money, but we can construct the infrastructure. We can try and find other ways, customized local ways of how to pay them back. And of course, even we should not disagree with the fact that peace talks can still be very important in such a situation. Even if the UN systems or the ICJ's judgment is final, we still do not have to disgrace that. We can still have talks. I am happy we have a National Youth Parliament representative here. Congo is home to a national youth something of peace and settlement.
Yes.
House at Goma in Congo. And it also actually has a national youth policy like Uganda. The youth should have those talks. The heads of states should have those talks. We should still continue with these talks. Who knows, they could actually reduce that sort of amount, not reducing it in a way of forgiving Uganda or what. It has to pay for its the atrocities that happened there internationally. But then how do we pay it without having to infringe on our economic rights or making the, the whole economy of Uganda also suffer, the taxpayers' money suffer? So irrespective of us taking keen interest in the case and saying, yes, we agree, we did wrong, we need to also look at how, imagine if we had strengthened our African courts and had a domestic way of doing it before moving out there, then I think the decision would have been different. Because in 2 seconds, the decision was actually made by a table of over 15 judges, most of whom have never set foot in Africa, which is not bad, but do they know how practical it is for Uganda to be able to pay that? At least there are other ways we can do that for sure.
Good question. I love this offer. Ndugu Hafasha, just to conclude with you, Lawel brought in a very important aspect. He said that there are individuals whose names were actually mentioned, I think, in the initial court filing. Okay? And he's saying that why should the taxpayer be burdened by this very heavy financial implication on the country? He's saying that why can these individuals pay for their individual costs? But the lawyers also will tell you that there is something called vicarious liability. Yeah, that yes, whereas the individuals went out of order to do what they did, there is vicarious liability where, as a country, we have to own up for their actions and mistakes. So do you agree that, well, even if as a country we are going to pay it, can these individuals be the ones to solicit the money and then we pay it? Or you think the taxpayer anyway should shoulder the burden?
Wow, it's interesting, especially when Ndogura will put it. And I would have to vehemently disagree with him. Unless Africa as the AU has nothing to offer in the case moment, I would want to also quote Nelson Mandela. Okay? In one of his speeches, he equally put it that if people are taught how to hate, then they can be taught how to love. For love comes with its natural instincts. Okay? And let us try to look at the impact. And I want to focus at the long run. When I was growing up, I'm from Kisoro. That's where I'm born from. That means in 1980s, 2000s, 2005, I was really observing. And I happened to attend a primary school in one of the closest schools in Busanza, in Western Uganda, deep now.
Which is Eastern Congo.
Yes, which is Eastern Congo. Yeah. So some of these things, some of them I have seen them with my eyes. And because of that refugee problem, that means most of them have been passing through the borders of Bunagana, Busanza, and the sort. So that means if we are to look at these individuals paying for themselves, we would want to understand where are they going to get the money. If, for example, the names that have been cited out to make the clearances and paying the fines, where are they going to get the money? Aren't they Ugandans?
No, but Lawel is saying that they are the ones who got the gold and timber. So probably they sold these gold to Americans and they have money somewhere.
Good. That's why I said
in the house.
That's why I said
that is Lawel's argument. I want to believe. Right? Yeah.
That's what he said. I also wanted to understand what was the purpose primarily of Uganda getting to Congo. And like you said, there is a proof.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, that takes us to this short commercial break. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for keeping with us. Please feel free to put your comments on the comment section. Feel free to subscribe to this channel. Like I said, see you shortly after the break. Yes, friends and viewers, thank you for keeping it Youth Roundtable. We did end on a light note, and I'll begin with the same note. Ndugu Hafashaimana, before we went for the break, you were making a very passionate point. Let me give you 2 minutes to make that point, then we can pick it up from there.
Thank you. I would be a little bit controversial on the question we had on the conclusion as we went for the break. If there would be individuals with evidence that they are tagged on the damages and the whatever, then it could be taken upon themselves to ask them to pay the money. That is on one side. But also, if there is no evidence, then I will also have to still insist that the fine of the $325 million would be unnecessary, because I'm trying to look at where is the country going to get all this money. And I'm also trying to assert it that there is no any penny that can buy a single human life, something of the sort. And because I also want to give a direction on what best now, how, if there has been this, then what next? If there would be a chance, whether the court ruling from the ICJ is the final, whether whether the leaders have negotiated, I think there should always be a chance to negotiate. Whether Uganda has been given a chance and the Uganda didn't take part, but I'm aware that the president, His Excellency the President, had been with Mama Mbabas, Honorable Mama Mbabas. They were in Congo previously, I think, over the weekend. So also would want to understand what transpired after the engagement with the leadership in Congo. And I'm also trying to look at the perspective that...
was that DRC Congo?
It was Congo Brazzaville.
Oh, it was Congo Brazzaville.
But again, they had His Excellency Sekedi with them in Brazzaville, with the President of Congo. Yes.
Yeah, now if they met, that is the top leadership of the how many countries. So if that happened, we also want to understand what was the negotiation. If the president met the president, the other side, then we also want to understand what they reached at. But as the Hafashaimana Asiimwe, I want to look at how, if this money they insist should be paid, we need to look at if it should be paid by cash or in other forms. We have border cross countries where we have the Congolese coming to Uganda and Uganda is going back to Congo. Citizens, okay? So can we see at these borders, for example, in Bunagana at customs office, there are these other charges, the trade visa charges and visas. Yes. Can they exempt these Congolese from paying these charges, such that maybe in how many years it shall have looked at as a compensation of all the money? So I'm also trying to look at how the dependency burden is going to be matched. Of course, Ndugura will also say that we could equally allow international aid. But for how long shall we look at economic sustainability as Uganda, but also as East Africa? Yes, there would be these other views from here and there, but we need to look at the young people's future being compromised. Of course, like I have always put it, that George Padmore, one of the great Pan-Africanists, said that if the future of the world lies into the hands of the young people, then I equally see the future of Uganda among the young people. So now, if the future of the young people is being compromised, remember, it is only not like an election that when you lose the future, you come back to aspire and then get back. No, it's now. So I'm trying to look at really at an angle whereby it is us now to defend. And the good news is that each of us here is at least a born of 1995 and beyond. It is not 1995 and below. So now that it is our time, I want to look at where our kids, our grandchildren, our daughters are not going to really face the repercussions. Because it's a heavy, yes, it's much money as looking at it, but man, surely the Uganda, that money is not really sufficient to compensate all of those.
Thank you. Ndugu Lawel, you are a law scholar or a law student, and you know the precedent of he who alleges must prove. So Ndugu Hafashaimana is saying those are allegations that you're putting across, that if there are individuals who indeed are mentioned in that case, do you have any names? Because these are your allegations. So the burden of proof and burden of defense falls on you.
First, I want to first make a clarity that it was not my argument that those who perhaps were accused of taking gold and minerals should be the ones to pay. I think I said it that there is evidence that indeed Uganda was involved in taking these minerals from Congo. We had reports around individuals like Kulaije, like Kazini, etc. I think it is impossible for them as individuals in their individual capacity to be charged to pay for that cost. But I think I think from where I come from, the now generation, is it is high time as a country, especially as the young people of this country came together and had these sober discussions, is that the future of our country it looks bad, and that we all as the youth have to pay for the mistakes of the generations before us. And therefore, there is a generational cause that should bring us together to act across the divide, regardless of political parties. And we must be honest about these discussions, because the consequences, the money you say is a lot. In my view, even any other person who is not a Ugandan would say, look, you were involved in creating these crimes of aggression against the people of Congo. Millions of people died. You took minerals. I think it is only fair that you compensate for that. The reason why we are saying this is a lot of money is because as a country, we are doing bad. But in the face of justice, we are supposed to pay these monies. So you look at us, a country doing very badly. Our debt burden is very high, especially due to COVID-19, and we are supposed to pay this money. And like she was asserting in the break, that we are the ones who are going to pay this money. But these are mistakes of decisions of members, of heads of states, the president, the commanders, who decided not only protect our country's interest, but went ahead to enrich themselves to engage in actions that are not coherent with international law, but also with basic justice, basics of justice. So we as a generation are supposed to pay for the mistakes of the people who are still in government, and therefore I think moving forward we need to have these discussions. And I think Uganda also as a country must establish a consistent, defined international policy. I think what we have currently is a policy tied to the interest of the head of state, who perhaps looks more into regime survival as opposed to the general long-term effects to the state. And that is to say that his intervention in these countries perhaps is not tied to what does Uganda gain or lose. It is tied to where is my regime best protected. Look, I have had bad relations with the Western world, and now because ADF is saying they are working with ISIL, I must be seen to fight ADF so that I can get buy-in from the east, from the west, right? So you do not see where the state interest is. At least where I come from the now generation, we think that our international policy is not defined. We think it is tied to regime survival, and that as a country, we must have an action plan. We must have a sober discussion. Look at us now. We are saying we have debts, because currently our debt burden arose by more than, I think, 30%. When you look at the budget framework that was just released, you know, and now we are supposed to pay these hefty amounts of money. I think also, and again to conclude with the issue of negotiation, I think it is the best alternative to have these negotiations. But we must understand that Uganda's role in Congo, its interventions, even the current ones, are very unpopular in the largest part of Congo. Eastern Congo is only 12% of Congo, but the other area, which is stable, which does not have war, which has the elite, they think that Uganda's role undermines its sovereignty, and therefore to the extent that but
Lawel, I'll tell you that we were there on the invitation. Actually, we are there on the invitation.
Yes, just conclude that. Yes, the invitation by the president, but the larger elite, the larger population there, does not seem to have a consensus around that intervention.
The president is a representation of the people.
That is wrong. I think it is wrong.
That is right. That is why we can comfortably send our head of state to go and sign treaties on our behalf. He commits the country. So it is unfair to think that, or to say that, you know, because we are there on the invitation of the DRC Congo government. Which
Kidega, look at
is a representation of the people.
Kidega, look at it this way, that the president is entrusted with power to act on behalf of the people.
Exactly.
But it is not true that all the decisions the president makes, the majority are in agreement with them. You could look at our national directives by the president. You have a larger population which perhaps does not agree with them. And this is, and the point I want to make is that you have an election that is forthcoming, and you do not know who is going to, how it's going to go, because if Uganda is to achieve its interest, it means Congo must compromise. How does that factor play out on the larger voting population, where you have a larger section of Congo which does not agree with Uganda's intervention? We must agree that even when you say that the president intervened them, countries always have this general feeling of autonomy that foreign countries should not you know, have a bigger say in affairs of our own country. So I fear.
How is that a bigger say if it influences only 12% of the country's population? So that is a very small part of the country.
I think you need to understand the demographics. That the Eastern Congo is largely a failed state, where you have a lot of militia activities. There is little government control. You have pattern militias superintending over particular territories. So largely there is a crisis, but ADF is a common challenge to Uganda, Rwanda, and Congo, and therefore there is an incentive for us to be there. But the larger general feel from even our the Congo crisis we are talking about, the individuals in Congo are not happy about the atrocities of Uganda, and therefore even the intervention, the larger population, which is stable, has issues with it. So my problem also is that to what extent can Congo compromise on this $325 million? How does it affect Tshisekedi? Currently, I think we have a good relationship, but if Tshisekedi gets out, I think there will be a challenge, especially if the Kabila they are able to bounce back.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Thank you. That was very passionate. Let me come to you, Comrade Patience. Patience, for the benefit of our viewers, let's get some clarity on whether this was a criminal case or it was a civil suit. From my little legal knowledge, I know that a criminal case cannot proceed without representation of the person being accused or without representation of the accused you know, party. But we know that part of the court proceedings went on ex parte. Is it ex parte, where, you know, court proceeding continues even with or without the presence of the other party? So that means that there was a civil element to this, you know, court case. So for the benefit of our viewers, help us distinguish between, was this a criminal case or was it a civil suit filed against Uganda?
Okay, thank you so much. Well, you know, the crimes or the issues that were stated by the ICJ while solving the issue ranged from armed aggressions in the Congo, crimes against humanity, which brings the criminal aspect, and then things to do with theft of the minerals and all that.
So it was a criminal case?
So largely criminal, yes. But then in international and humanitarian law cases, we look at which parties were there for the conflict.
Because if it were a criminal case, I would expect it to have been filed in the International Criminal Court. But then it
that is where I'm getting to. This is a matter of an international armed conflict. International armed conflict, we look at which states are party to the case. So we're looking at Uganda coming into Congo as an occupying state, which makes it international. Because if it was just a rebel group within Congo and Congo army or something, it would be a non-international conflict. So when something goes international, then all the basic principles of law also upgrade to an international aspect of it. So when you look at it being crimes against humanity or crimes against IHL, the principles of IHL well written down in the 4 Geneva Conventions, we see that the way we actually litigate on such a matter also changes. It has a broader aspect to it because we're looking at thousands of murder cases, thousands of probably aggression and atrocities within, maybe to the women, the children, and the belligerents that were there during the wartime. So that question would bring us to looking at it at a broader aspect, looking at it from an international armed conflict aspect. Because if we're to deal with an international armed conflict the same way I'm dealing with a criminal case in a nation, then I think justice will not be served duly. So in addition to that, I just want to say that irrespective of how this was done in the ICJ, and yes, the judgment is final, there are other ways in which this justice can still be served, especially when you look at it objectively as opposed to just subjective. We need to look at what's the impact of it? What's the reason why we are serving justice? Because we want it to prevail over the victims. So Congo, yes, is victim, and for them, they want their money or they want that sort of reparation. And we need to also put in time, what is the importance of a reparation? A reparation is to pay back in time to make sure that a person who was a victim is actually compensated for. So how are those victims going to be compensated for? And that is why even earlier on I was saying, yes, we agree and respect the ICJ and international bodies because we're supposed to domestically first handle our matters before going to them. But we need to look at how will this money be trickled down to the victims? How is it going to be effective for a nation that still is in debt, and that 325 is a fraction of what is yet to be paid to Kinshasa? How will the victims? Me, that is the most funny bit of it, actually. So I think it's a wake-up call, and I'm so passionate about this because for us we still have, we're going to be leaders probably in the future, and we're going to be the ones seated on such tables. You never know, or even a youth out there watching this program. And trust me, this burden is going to shift to you. And I was telling my comrade here that this burden might also shift to even kids who have not yet been born, who are going to be born 20 years to come.
Thank you.
So we need to be active.
Thank you.
Yes.
Ndugu David.
Yes, sir.
Operation Shuja. We managed to capture Camp Yayuya, something like that, as the UPDF. Earlier on, you said something that I agree with, which is the discipline of the UPDF. I agree that the UPDF has ever since grown. We have become a more professional and disciplined army. That much we give it to them. Of course, there are pocket cases of, indiscipline here and there, but I think largely, it's a force that we can say kudos. So my question to you now is that, do you think, because now we are back, okay? Yes. We are back again. So do you think that our discipline as a force will exonerate us this time round, or we anticipate or predict that the same thing that happened in a few years ago will happen again? What confidence can we speak with?
Ndugu Kidega, I thank you for that question. To begin with, is it a coincidence that now that Uganda and Rwanda are progressive consensus-wise, and this ruling is made? Why am I saying this? Let's draw our minds back to what happened in Kinshasa, rather in Kisangani, right? The Battle of Kisangani. Remember Professor Diawamba, Diawamba, the Lumbala and Nyarugabo, they fell out. The Rally for Democracy, they are the rebel outfit. And remember, Rwanda and Uganda were supporting this rebel outfit to capture the DRC, to capture Kinshasa in that lightning operation, and it failed. Why did it fail? Because at the mind of the administration in Kampala, it was anticipating that we can form both a political and a military organization, the people's movement, like the mind of President Museveni here. But the administration in Kigali, it was interested in winning the war, despite the form, the content, the nature. They just wanted to have that victory. So when Uganda and Rwanda fell out, of course, they started hitting at each other. They even arrested, and there were a lot of killings, because why was Uganda in any case training Professor Diawamba's outfit and all that? Now, why am I taking us back to that? Now that Uganda and Rwanda have chosen to work together, it means that chances of us fighting from the Congo are minimal, because we are both still in the Congo. You understand that? if Uganda tries or progressively works with Rwanda,
yes,
both of us are in Congo, to flash out maybe FDLR, us to flash out ADF, it means that now we are taking the right route.
yes.
Because what we are trying to solve today is a symptom of an underlying pathology. If we don't discuss how Uganda and Rwanda are treating each other,
Yes.
in Congo, we are just trying to build, to square a circle or to build a castle in air.
Yes.
Right? So our progression, our working with Rwanda is designing some progress for the stability of Congo and us not to face the same challenges that we have been facing before. That said, when you want to solve a political problem, you create a contradiction. Why am I saying that? And I want again to take us back to Parliament before I forget this. Since UPDF has come of age, professionalism, discipline, I think it's high time the UPDF and the Commander-in-Chief started engaging the public, consulting, because this is what is going to move us forward as a country. You see, we need to have consensus to hold honest discussions about even these, our national army going out there. We can forgive the UPDF. We can understand the UPDF at that time. It was an emergency. At that time, there was no organization at all. We didn't understand these matters. But this country, there's a lot of now a civic competence under which we can now go to the parliament, not just to inform it, but to consult it. Because at the end of the day, this state burden is going on the taxpayers. And you realize if we cannot go now, we cannot run to the International Monetary Fund to get, because at the end of the day, how are we going to pay this money? That's a question, by the way, we all ask ourselves right now. If we cannot find the money, if the culprits cannot find the money, we shall run to the International Monetary Fund. Should it look at our human rights record? It's going to have to ask a lot of questions. Now we shall run to China. If you run to China, China gives you money in September, it wants it in April. You understand? Or it attaches your lake, it attaches your forests, you get. So the actions, every action has an equally opposite reaction. So we ask the president that now it's high time the country is involved. National reconciliation, national consensus, so that we can feel proud of this and we know what is the army going out there to do, how is it going to behave, should it find issues with another army. We shouldn't really stay in the mind of the early 80s of if we've chosen as the high command, we just go and assault and because at the end of the day, we have to have a fallback position and it is Uganda. And at the end of the day, we are Ugandans. So we are progressing as a country. Now that we have oil, I think we are going to have to promise them some oil, to give them some money from oil. At least they can forgive us and we try to buy some time and we pay at our pace because now we need the Congo and I believe we are going to work together as a region. And we need the Congo in the East African region. Then they need it in SADC.
Perfect. Fair enough. Ndugu Lawel, let me rephrase for you the Attorney General's statement. He said that Uganda has been singled out, and I quote for you, singled out. Why? Because there were many countries that were involved in that crisis. Namibia, Zimbabwe, Rwanda, Angola, mention them, they were all there. But why is it that it's Uganda that is being punished or that is shouldering all this burden? Is it because, our actions were any different from the rest? Do you think we are being unfairly?
Yes, I want to agree. I think it is unfair because this was a war that that involved around 12 countries on the side, and these atrocities, things like destruction, perhaps were a product of the war. So I think it is quite unfair for Uganda to shoulder all the burden, and that is the argument that I think William Byarhanga, who was Attorney General at some point, was advancing, especially when they said 11 billion or 4 billion. It made it seem that Uganda was supposed to pay for all the destruction that happened in Congo, yet Uganda was just part. I think it is unfair to say that Uganda should shoulder all the burden of what happened in Congo, because you had other countries like Rwanda, which actually played one of the most pivotal roles, especially the initiation of that war. Should Uganda shoulder a particular burden? I think yes. I think what is unfair is to say that Uganda should pay for all what happened in Congo. But should Uganda at least also be held liable as an entity? I think yes, because they played a part. But I think as we move towards the close, I think that he makes a very good point about why we need to take decisions as a country, and why even when, because there was a contention about whether going to Congo, the parliament should have been involved, as the constitution says. even to put the constitution aside, right? Because that's what they're saying. They argue a lot about the constitution, but we must understand why these provisions exist in the first place. It is a realization that the army, well, they are the ones who fight, but they act on behalf of the entire country, and that when everything goes wrong, all right, we are affected. So currently we have to pay. It's not the army going to pay these monies. It is our taxpayers' money, right? So even in the current venture in Congo, if anything goes bad, we are supposed to shoulder the burden as a country. So it is only important, especially in a system like ours, that once the army is going to intervene in these things, we must have a debate within the national parliament which represents all of us.
But
we should have consensus.
I'll tell you from a security dilemma that some of these interventions are highly classified. That if the country or the CDF or the commander-in-chief is to inform the entire country about a given operation against a rebel outfit, then that could compromise the security and operation.
You see,
so does that argument
I think the
play?
Constitution itself provides for particular instances where they, like hot pursuit, right? Where there are those particular instances where they can first intervene and then report back. But generally, and like these circumstances, you are supposed to inform Parliament and have discussion. And again, goes back to, I think, your fears of discretion. When you are, I think what is debated is whether we should intervene or not. You don't discuss the intricacies, how much
the operation itself.
Yes, how we are going to enter, how much equipment we have. But should we intervene? Should we use war? I think those are discussions that must be held in the realm of the public, because currently we are supposed to pay a debt. We are supposed to pay a reparation of $325 million. Who all of us here agree we don't have that money. And yet we perhaps in these circumstances, the new way of doing things, we don't have a say on how we get involved there. If we agree, intervene, there are repercussions, we face them because we participated in the decision. So conclusively, I think we still have some consensus here that I think as a country and Uganda, we must modify and define our international policy. We did not choose as Uganda to have these neighbors who have a lot of issues. You have South Sudan with war, you have Congo, you have Rwanda, which has just
been there before.
You have Kenya, whose stability is dependent on how the election goes. So after 4 or 5 years, you're not sure whether that Kenya, but we must find a more feasible, a more modified, accommodative policy as a country, not as as the state head, as who protects his interests, but as a country.
Yeah, fair enough. Just to add something to your submission, yes, you're pushing us to define our foreign policy and national interest, but I'll tell you that according to political scholars, they will argue that a country's national interest is at times defined by its domestic set of values. Now, Uganda is a multi-nation state. We have many nations within the same state. The Bachiga nation, Acholi nation, all those are different nations with different values and different norms and cultures. So Uganda as a country will by all means find it hard to shape its national interest and foreign policy because of the lack of indigenousness in the population. But that's for another day.
It will be an interesting discussion.
Ndugu Asiimwe, let me come to you. Let's speak about the Uganda-Congo relationship. I will tell you that not so long ago, there's a process to initiate DRC Congo to the EAC community. We have made progressive, interactions and treaties, the Lusaka Treaty and all those, But the most recent is that, we are even constructing roads in Congo. So we seem to have developed, a very good relationship. But this ruling could make sour. So speak to the aspect of how is this ruling going to affect our relationship? Shall we continue to progress, or it will be 2 steps forward, 3 steps backwards?
Great. Different views are still ongoing on reasons why Uganda has been constructing roads in Congo, yet there are roads in Uganda that are not yet constructed or even rehabilitated. But direct to the question, we have young people, all Congolese who are within Uganda. And a bit of the reminder is that in the 1990s and 2003, like we put it in the first place, there was, yes, the genocide of the 1994 that took about those 100-something days, but also there was a war, the genocide and the war. But Uganda had or has had a relationship, a working relationship with Congo and Rwanda. and a decision whether Congo should be integrated within the East African Community member states, it's not a wrong one. It's a wise decision. Because at the end of the day, these are our immediate neighbors, and of which I think Uganda benefits from, but also Congo does benefit from Uganda.
Yes.
The number of refugees that we have in Uganda, in Changwale, Chaka, and wherever Nachivale,
yes,
these are people from Congo, and they have finally made homes in Uganda.
Actually, Uganda is a host to the biggest number of refugees, at least in sub-Saharan Africa. About 1.4, 1.6 million refugees.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and these people have ended up marrying up Ugandans. You never know Ndugura might even spot someone.
Not even the marrying, the resources they consume in the country, the access to social services, of healthcare, of education, all that have, you know, a progressive impact on the country and the nation. So maybe Congo could consider how hospitable we have been to the refugees, you know, in the most recent past, and say, okay, yes, Uganda has been having our refugees at no cost.
But they'll ask you who created the crisis in the first place.
No. Yes, we can be indicted on that same aspect, but I think progressively we can have, you know, a round-table conversation. So
yes, thank you for those submissions. But now, I want to look at this as a perspective of the young people, especially students. Those are Congolese who are studying with us, the Ugandans.
Yes.
And I'm thinking the Secretary for National Affairs, a body for Uganda National Students Association,
yes,
this shouldn't be left behind. At the right time moment when we speak, you say I want to look at the essential commodities, be it soap, be it sugar, be it salt, those things. We cannot live without them. And once we say, that Congo agrees that we need to pay all this money, that means it's going to affect us. And relationship-wise, of course, as Hafashaimana, at the level where I am, like she said, we are the leaders of tomorrow, and also want to say, no, we are the leaders of today. Only that where we want to be, we haven't yet reached there.
So you're saying we are not viongozi wa kesho.
Kabisa.
We are viongozi wa
exactly
waleo.
That one, yes, waleo. Now, looking at that, a soap that has, a bar of soap, White Star, has been bought at around 3,500, but today it's about 7,000. And yes, I have the facts. I have my brother who did it yesterday.
Yes.
Then, so you see, now when you look at these prices, it is not actually us the Ugandans who are paying this money, but also the Congolese that are living within Uganda who are paying this money through the taxes levied on these essential commodities. So looking at the relationship in a long run, it will have to definitely affect us. We are going to produce, like I put before. So I want to agree with Ndugu Mugyema, especially when he said that yes, the UPDF has done good, and shouldn't the UN understand, or shouldn't the ICJ understand that actually UPDF has done more good than harm?
Exactly.
You see, here on earth, it is only at death
that we appreciate
functions that we appreciate someone. And I'm trying to look at it. Why can't the ICJ? Yes, why can't the ICJ appreciate UPDF's work in Congo? It has not only done this in Congo, but also in Somalia.
In Africa.
Not also in Somalia, but also everywhere. So can they understand the impact of the UPDF in keeping peace in the whole Africa?
Well, just to move towards the conclusion, just to make a comment about international community. For us to appreciate the role of the United Nations, we must go back to 1918, when Woodrow Wilson, as USA president, introduced what he called the League of Nations back then. That has ever since transformed into the United Nations. And the idea back then was a balance of power and balance of security agenda. So when you see the UN acting at times the way it acts, we should trace back its initial agenda. But anyway, conclusively, let us move to get your final words on this show. And I'll begin with Ndugu Lawel. I'll come to Comrade David, Comrade Hafashaimana, then the lady on the panel will be privileged to give us the final word. So from you, you have 1 minute.
Thank you so much.
It can be a way forward. And
yes, I think I already gave my way forward that as a generation, we must come together and have discussions that cut across. I think that we realize that the challenges, me and you, perhaps you're NRM and I am not, but we are all going to pay the tax, a higher tax to pay this debt. And therefore that we should be able to examine things for what they really are and also subscribe the right medicine, because unless we objectively examine these things and realize, look, there is a challenge, especially with those that make decisions for us and act on our behalf, and that we need to come together and say, look, this is how we think things should be done. unless we do that, I think headed for a worse situation.
Okay.
There's I think what we are in currently, we like he says, the inflation, the prices of things. I think as a country we are doing very badly. I would want to appeal maybe to those who are watching us that government, away from this discussion, should be deliberate, to take away this challenge from us. I think again, the challenges we are facing today, the cost of living, is because government made some wrong decisions with vaccination and charging people on the border. The price went high. Even when it is being stabilized, the other prices, which are dependent on the oil, have not come down. But also, I think that we need to, I think generally, perhaps from where I speak from, I think that government needs to be very deliberate. Sometimes I sit where I sit and I think that the think tanks in this country are not working. Where we are, the prices is because we do not have a clear strategy, a sustainable plan on the issue of fuel, on the stability, long-term stability of petrol and oil prices. That's a discussion we shall have in another day. But what we are faced with, and I'm happy with this discussion, is that today we are paying for the atrocities we committed then. It doesn't matter whether our UPDF is better today, but today we pay for what we did last time. So moving forward, if we make mistakes today, the people after then, even when we have become angels, will pay for the decisions we make now. So I want to call upon the youth of this country to sober up, take on the mantle, to look at these issues objectively and subscribe the right solutions, regardless of where we come from. We are a country that is in the middle of nowhere. Thank you so much.
Many thanks, Ndugu Mugyema.
Thank you so much, Honorable Lawel and Ndugu Kidega. As a country, we have now an obligation to look inwardly, internally. We just have to now sit down and reflect. Where we have come, it has been really a long journey. We have to appreciate the strong men and women of this country that have brought us this far. Even for us to have capacity to sit here and deliberate, it's a privilege. But now we are not where we want to be as a nation. There's so many challenges that we are faced as a young generation, us being the biggest percentage. It's not something to really brag about, because youth is just a transition age.
Yeah.
But now how we make use of today will determine where we're going to stand as a nation tomorrow.
Sure.
While we cry for government to come up and give chance for these discussions, it is for the betterment of Uganda as a country. There's what we call civic competence. I spoke about it in the previous. But do Ugandans even know what is happening in the country? Do they know? Or people are just enjoying, some liquor, having fun, the young generation? So people are to the outside, before you know it, go CDK. Those are the conversations that the young people are holding.
Youth are aware.
Exactly. Yeah. That's very catastrophic as a country. If we build a civic competence, if government gives chance for the young people to sit down and understand where we are as a country, I think we will make informed decisions that are going to put Uganda in a better position. We don't want to go back to where we were. I am telling you, Congo for the first time went for its election when they were voting for Joseph Kabange Kabila. After 40 years of these instabilities and all that, you get. But now we are lucky. We have not seen war for the past years. NRA has been here. So we can build from here. We urge government to academically now, because what shapes the nation? What does it teach its people? You understand? A lot of people, we thank President Museveni has taught people, we were vaccinated, we have gone to school, but that's not enough. The production rate of this country is really low and low and low. Even those policies that government keeps on, speaking about Operation Wealth Creation, Emioga, and now Parish Development Medal, in most cases, most of the money that is allocated goes in administrative costs. The young person there, the young leader out there doesn't have access to this money. It ends up somewhere in local government, people eat it, the CDOs, it becomes a chess game, and we don't solve the problem.
Yeah.
So we want to urge government to really try to, if indeed agriculture is our backbone, I wouldn't wish to leave this platform without mentioning this. Let them cut taxes off the pesticides. Let them give us tractors on every sub-county. Let them encourage the youths to go back. Let them encourage the youths not to sell their land, to buy borders. So if we solve that as a country and we produce, then we shall have value addition. When we add value, we're going to have to produce a lot and sell outside. If we sell outside, we're going to earn a lot of foreign currency. When we earn foreign currency, we're going to have money in our... Yeah, Uganda is going to become a bit free country. Otherwise, I thank you so much. Yeah. God bless you so much. I remain David Mugyema. I sign out.
Fair enough. Ndugu, 2 minutes?
Yeah, thank you. I think I want to 2 minutes. Okay. I want to first substantiate something small from Mugyema's submission in his conclusion. Looking at one of the pillars of NRM party, the socio-economic transformation bit of it, like at each of the sub-counties in Uganda, there are those plots of land that belongs to the sub-county. And none of the young people own is a share on that kind of, you know. So if there could be a way how the government can make it a policy that maybe if there are how many square miles, square kilometers and whatnot, then there should be a portion for these young people to involve themselves into agriculture. After all, agriculture is the backbone of the country. Then to the rest in my conclusion, especially to the viewers and those watching us, my humble submission is that better is always better than good, and best is always better than better. And like we began, where purpose is not known, abuse is inevitable. So it's high time to understand where actually the country is going, where the future generation is going to fit. And I think with the little said, I would beg to submit. Thank you, Ndugu Kidega.
Many thanks. Comrade Poni, you have the last words.
Okay, thank you. Well, this has been a very interesting conversation. And I just want to say that to all those out there, you need to go ahead and look into such a case because it's been over 16 years. And finally, they've told us of the judgment because back and forth movement and all that. So, so we need to understand the background of this case and know all these things that have been happening with the Nicaragua and USA cases that were there in time, and how this trickles down to our economy and our diplomatic relations between the two countries. Like earlier on, we had mentioned that two states are already doing well, and actually draws my head back to the East African community talks. We looked at how East Africa was there before the initial talks of the community since the 1960s and in 1970s with its collapse, and then recently again in the 2000s when the talks started again. Assuming we were an East African community and we had the same currency and the same state, which of course might be a little difficult because of national individual interests. But assuming we had such a thing, how would the case turn out? Would we still have to pay as a community, or would Uganda still be there to pay for it? And it's a wake-up call to our government out there, whether we are leaders of today or tomorrow as youth. Tomorrow could be tomorrow as in tomorrow day, or today immediately, but we all have to be alert to it, you know. Youth should avoid being on talks that are less relevant to our nation. We cannot rule out the importance of patriotism because at the end of it all, we are still nationals of Uganda. And this is a matter that affects us all. So as taxpayers, as everyone out there, the government needs to prioritize. My take home for today and my last remarks is that the government needs to prioritize what we are doing, because as opposed to giving maybe the 500 million to members of parliament or wasting resources, or putting millions of money in sectors that are not doing so much, or putting it effectively, then we need to know that we have a debt burden, we have a lot to pay. You can see that $325 million is just a fraction of what we are supposed to pay Kinshasa. So if we have that alert call and prioritize our needs as leaders, learning and leadership is really dispensable. So we have to know that we are not there for our personal interests, but for the youth at large and for the whole country, our nationals. So we need to be patriotic and be selfless in our service to avoid personal interests, because at the end of it all, we have seen this at the end, the judgment is going to backfire on all of us in the future run. And of course, we should look at alternative dispute resolution mechanisms to ensure that that cash, which might not be there in the next 30 years, can be distributed in other sectors or find other ways of paying. Yes, thank you so much.
Yes, Comrade Lawel, Comrade Mugyema, Comrade Patience, and Comrade Asiimwe, thank you very much for being an amazing panel. To our viewers, thank you very much for tuning in every single day of the week to join us for our weekly Youth Roundtable conversations. Of course, to Comrade Rashid and the technical team, thank you very much. You always make it a point to ensure that our viewers get this show right on time. My last words on this show are the words of Kenneth Kaunda, who said that to build a nation, we all must live beyond our expectations. Are you living beyond your expectation, or you're doing the ordinary? Thank you, and see you next week. Bye-bye.